Yeah, buddy. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Brotherhood of Kings Live. This is okay. Checking out my connection. Fairly good. This is Paul, one of the facilitators for the Brotherhood of Kings Collective. So happy to have you here with us. If you're here watching on the replay, type in the comments replay, #replay. Blessings, blessings, blessings. I'm excited to get into this topic today. Maybe me flying solo today, so thank you for your patience in advance as I work through the content and also work through the comments. So blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you all for showing up and tapping in. Today we're going to be going over conflict and attachment. Conflict and attachments. What? Yes. Conflict and attachments. So this was a result of two calls that we had today. Actually, yeah. There we go. Coach Taylor. Hold up. Present. Scan. There we go. Yeah, now we're cooking. All right, Coach. What's up, Coach? Let's get Coach in here. Coach, what's happening, my guy?
What's happening? What's happening, guy?
How you doing, man?
I'm on the call, babe.
Hey, Mrs. Taylor. How you doing, Mrs. Taylor? What's up? What's up, Coach?
It's all good, man. It's just me and you today?
Yeah, man. That's right. Just me and you, man. We're gonna rock it, man. We're gonna rock it. We got the topic of, I was just explaining to the peoples. We got the topic of attachments and conflicts. So, Coach, yeah. Oh, we're going in, man. Coach. First of all, Coach, how you doing, man?
Doing fine. I've been painting and doing honeydews all day.
The honeydew list, huh?
Yeah, man. I had the honeydew list, man.
All right, bro. Listen, man, that list is potent, man.
You remember that wall that I showed you I was making with the 1x2 slats to paint it? Dude, hooked it up, man. Hung some pendant lights, man, and now I'm painting the bathroom. And like I said, my wife said she married me because I can fix stuff.
She was a smart woman, man. Smart woman. That's what's up, man. So, Coach, it's looking good?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. Actually. Looking really good.
I bet you all didn't know, man. The Brotherhood of Kings has its own carpenter and craftsman.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Master of all things, man. Master of the book realm, spirit realm. Yes. So, Coach, man, welcome to this session. I want to check in, man. So, a couple things first. And for the people that are tapping in on the replay, blessings to you. The people that are about to tap in, awesome. Coach, question for you, man. What for you is conflict?
Well, let me make a distinction between fighting and conflict. Okay. So there are a lot of people out there who have the belief that relationships have to have fighting. I'm sure you've probably heard somebody they're going to teach you how to fight in relationships. I've never bought into that. It is my belief that you can have a relationship without ever fighting, but you can't have a relationship without conflict. Now, here's the distinction. Fighting is about being right. It's about an attachment to an idea. It's about an attachment to an idea that says, I'm refusing to see it any other way. So I'm right about this, whatever that is. So when we're in relationship and we're fighting, generally what we're doing is we have positions about something we're unwilling to compromise or see differently. Okay. Now, in a healthy relationship, again, I believe you don't have to fight, but you will always have conflict because that's just part of being human.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Perfect example. My wife and I, happily married for the past 23 years. Now, I fully understand how my wife thinks, how she feels. I'm just so connected to her, right?
Yeah.
So when we disagree or she does something I don't like, first of all, I can make a distinction between who she is and what she does. Okay, now you got to think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So when she does something that just irritates me, just right,
Yeah.
that's a conflict. But I don't have to be right about it. I just need to be honest about how I'm responding to that conflict. And so if I can be in the present moment,
Yeah.
okay, when there is a conflict, the conflict will never turn into fighting because I'm not attached to being right. I'm more attached to being happy. So for me, when it comes to relationship and I think about conflict, that's a natural part of being human. But I am so in tune and aware of my stuff. I don't get triggered by stuff. And so I can just maintain a sense of awareness and honesty with whatever might be bugging me or might be irritating me and just express that in the moment and not bring up stuff in the past that hasn't been resolved. Because a lot of times when people fight, they're usually fighting about something that has nothing to do with what they're fighting about. They're fighting about something that happened in the past that didn't get resolved. And so they bring it up in this particular experience to try to resolve it without knowing that that's what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm hearing like you talking more about the fighting part, right? What is conflict for you? And for the viewers that are watching, what like type in the comments like what is conflict for you? But coach, like I just want to get clear because I hear about the fighting piece. The fighting is about wanting to be right.
Yep.
And you mentioned that there's going to be conflict in relationship. So how would like that conflict in relationship that's for you being about right? Like how would you describe that like in a couple sentences for you?
The conflict itself,
Yeah, like
con-
what is conflict? What does conflict mean for you?
conflict is what happens when two human beings come together to have different opinions and perceptions about something.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. Yes, man.
So
Yes.
to me, that's
Yeah.
conflict. So I'm going to have ideas, perceptions, beliefs about certain things. My
Mhm.
wife may have completely different beliefs, perceptions about the same thing. Therefore,
Right.
it will create a conflict.
Right. It's yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, coach. That's what I was getting into because, and I like that you had the distinction about fighting because I think when people hear the word conflict, it automatically means like it's gonna be a fight, which I think is far from the truth.
Right.
So here's some things because we talked about this in the Wednesday circle, right? And I wrote down what some of the men labeled as like what because the question was what comes that I had in Wednesday's call, Wisdom Wednesdays. Check it out, everybody. Check out the newsletter. Make sure you get in on that call. I asked men when you hear the word conflict, what comes up in your mind and in your heart? Okay. Some of the questions or some of the responses as far as what comes to the mind: racial politics, internal conflict, disagreement, maturity levels, anger, excitement, fear, opposing side, blood pressure going up. All right. Legs get wobbly. And what else? Yeah, negativity. Now, when I asked what came up in the heart, fear, sadness, a wanting to resolve, anxiety, rage, peace, growth. And there was a really fascinating comment where one of the men said, loss and joy, gain and sadness.
Mm.
And yeah. That's what I said. When I heard the man say that, I was like, what? That's really interesting. And you know, I think it ties into why I found it interesting. Well, actually, Coach, before I go into that, like, because you had the same reaction I did when you heard that, right? So, what was the reaction that came up for you when you heard that loss and joy, gain and sadness?
Well, let's go back to Coach Michael Taylor 20 years ago
Oh,
when
we
he
going back, baby.
when when
Okay.
when he was the people pleaser, always seeking approval, disconnected from his emotions, not knowing how to express anger. Okay. That's a completely different guy than you're looking at right now.
Yeah.
But it really touches upon this whole idea of conflict because I used to avoid conflict at all cost.
Hands are up, man. Hands are up.
Just
Yep.
whatever it took. I did this, especially in relationship. When I was in a relationship with someone, I didn't know how to, number one, take up for myself because I was codependent. I was always worried about the other person leaving. So I didn't want to create conflict out of fear that they would leave. So it's been an interesting journey, which, first of all, I had to learn how to be okay with anger.
Yeah.
Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with healthy anger. But for me, that part of myself had been shut down. And so what I would do is rather than express my anger, I just shut down. I would not engage in conflict.
Yeah.
I would just sort of shut down and say, okay, whatever you say. And I didn't understand that it was okay for me to, number one, feel strongly about something and share that. And if I didn't like something, to be able to express that. And so that's been part of my journey, understanding that, number one, I need to be in touch with how I feel, honest about whatever that is. And then when the conflict happens, I can keep it about what that conflict is and not about something I haven't resolved in the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah, agreed, man. Coach, thank you for that, man. And this was something that came up in the call too about resistance to conflict. And a lot of the men, myself included, I can relate to what you were saying. I would avoid conflict like the plague, even in relationships, right? In relationships, in corporate, and even friendships, I would go through life doing my best to avoid conflict for a lot of the same reasons that you said. And for me, it was a big part of it too. Was I was unable to know how to manage my displeasure, my anger, or my discontent, which I at the time viewed as anger, right? Like, and really, it was like, how do I address this differing of opinions? Because again, like how when you go back, I was seeing conflict as, oh, this is going to be a fight. No, conflict is far from being a fight. Something I want to go over something that because there's a couple things that I think are important, right? Because we're going to talk about conflict and attachments. So when we had the circle on Wednesday, we went through this slideshow presentation. So I'm about to break this open real quick. So first of all, we talk about conflict here, peoples, right? Conflict is about, like Coach mentioned before, it's a differing of opinions, needs, interests among among individuals and or groups, right? It can lead to misunderstandings. It can lead to tension. It can lead to breakdowns in communication. That's conflict. All right. Now, what we were also went over on the call was we went over brain function. Okay. Why are we doing this? Why do we go over brain function? I'm glad you asked that, Coach, because I wanted people to understand that when we go into conflict, there's brain chemistry that can come into play when we fail to understand what conflict really is. I want to explain. What you're seeing here is an example or a highlight of our executive brain, our prefrontal cortex. The executive brain or the prefrontal cortex is responsible for our reasoning, our regulation, our thought process, being able to have an objective point of view. When you look at this other area here in this next slide, I highlighted something called the amygdala. which is part of our limbic system. Our limbic system is chemically or functioning responsible for our fight or flight responses. So this is based off of things that are emotional, things that can be perceived as stressful. Why I bring this up is because when we think about conflicts, I'm speaking for myself, I would always think of a conflict as something stressful. So what would happen? I would go into my amygdala, my limbic system. I'd be like, yo, I'm about to fight this monk too. I'm going to defend my stance. Or I'd be like, I don't want to deal with this conflict, so I'm out of here. Or I'd just be like, I don't even know what to say right now. Fight, flight, freeze, right? You, coach, you ever had that piece?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So people watching, have you ever had that where all of a sudden, like, you get to conflict and then it's like, oh, junk, like, I don't know what to do here, or you get super aggressive. What's happening right now is you slid into the your fight, flight, or freeze. Now, what tends to happen is when this is on, the limbic system, the amygdala is on, our executive brain is not on. Our executive brain is turned off. So what happens is we fail to see this situation from an objective point of view. Now, coach, you mentioned something too that's happened to me a lot, where I would avoid conflict as a recovering people pleaser. I'd be like, nah, you know what? I'm good, man. Nah, I'm not going to get in a fight with you. I'm not arguing with you. I just let things slide to the point where I'd have something called an amygdala hijack. The amygdala hijack happens when you keep suppressing your emotions, your feelings, like these things that are pissing you off. And all of a sudden, like a powder keg, you blow up and you do actions, or you say things or act in ways that are uncharacteristic of your true nature. Okay. So this is what happens. And we talked about this from a black male perspective. Like, a lot of times we get in these situations, and coach, I don't know if this happened for you, but I know for me, I've been in situations where it's like, look, man, I'm going to let things slide. And then all of a sudden I blow up on some cats. I'm like, yo, you know what? F you. You're cool, man. Get out my face. And then I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I said that. So coach, like, I'm curious, man, like, for you, right? What's the way, because now that you're a recovered people pleaser, how do you manage conflict? And people watching, please feel free to type in like what comes to mind in your heart when you hear the word conflict, or your thoughts about what we just showed. So coach, how do you manage conflict and the emotions that come around it for you, man?
Well, first of all, again, I think it begins with the awareness of how I feel. If I'm not aware of how I feel, then I can't act, shall I say, authentically. So, for example, back in the day when I didn't know how to express my anger in a healthy way, then again, what I would do was suppress, repress, and deny whatever that feeling was. And then I'd rationalize it in my head. I'm right, they're wrong, but I don't need to argue with them about it. I didn't know, because I didn't know how to tap into that healthy anger that allows us to set boundaries. See, it's healthy anger that allows us to set boundaries for ourselves. Well, for me, being the people pleaser that I was, people crossed over my boundaries all the time because I allowed them to, but I didn't have the awareness to say, no, just no, you can't do that. Especially in relationships. In the business setting, not so much. I didn't really have any problem setting boundaries because I was always the manager, and that was never really an issue. But in intimate relationships, my inability to set those boundaries for me and to put myself first did not allow me to handle conflict appropriately. Right. And so what would end up happening was again, I would just kind of shut down, disconnect, not express how I really felt, and never resolve the issue. The issue would never get resolved. And so the other person in their mind might have been right about it, but for me, it just caused me to almost go into a depression because I didn't know how to express myself authentically. So I would just shut down and then beat myself up for not speaking up.
Right.
So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I have to share this story because this is one of the turning points in my life. I read a book called "You Can Heal Your Life" by Louise Hay.
Oh, junk. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. And what I learned from that book was that because I had suppressed my anger, I had a lot of throat problems. And I
Mm.
didn't put the two together. But when I read that book, she says people that have throat problems generally are people who don't know how to express anger. And so
Mm.
after reading that book, I started learning how to get in touch with that anger and being okay with that anger. It was a process. It was part of my healing process. But as I learned to connect to the anger, I then was able to create healthy boundaries by
Mm.
being able and willing to say no in romantic relationships, being able
Mm.
to put myself first in relationship, stop being so codependent. And that's when everything began to change. Because first of all, I had to be okay with the feeling of anger. Because in
Mm.
my little mind, it was bad. Anger was bad. Because
Right.
when I grew up, I was in a very violent situation. And so my defense mechanism was to shut down and
Right.
not talk back, not to express how I felt. So I started repressing that anger at a very, very early age. But when I started healing that, then I was
Mm.
able to deal with conflict in a healthy way.
Dude, that's man. Thank you for that, man. Thank you for that. And thank you for bringing up Louise Hay because she is a powerful healer, and it brings up the metaphysical component of being resistant to conflict. Is that holding or suppressing that anger, or coach, like you mentioned, the coming back to what are you feeling? Like I think this is an important thing for men, for men of color, and also just people in general, because I think we as as a society steer away from the emotional component and being transparent about what we're experiencing, like whether it's anger, it's sadness, it's joy. Like we tend to, I noticed that there's a tendency to hide or suppress these, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not, or even resignation, like, well, I'm not even going to get in an argument with this person. And even saying the resignation and being like, I'm not dealing with this, you're suppressing. Something that came up in the call on Wednesday when we first started talking about this in Wisdom Wednesday was just the term of somebody's like, "Hey, I want to be writing." Okay, like hearing what they have to say and okay, like what do you mean okay? And it was funny because not funny, haha. But when this man spoke that in the circle, I personally was like, "Damn, there's power in saying okay." Like you can have it. Like it's okay. I'm hearing what you're saying. I respect your perspective and I'm still going to keep mine. But like it's okay where we are. Now, coach, here's the thing. Because you mentioned about like avoiding the conflict, right? And avoiding or just like being resistant to conflict and speaking up. I'm curious, have you heard of something called attachment styles?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, so man, bruh, so we went into that piece on Saturday's call. Okay. Now, when we started going to that, I recognized like there's a couple of attachment styles that I think feed into conflict. All right. So for people who are like, yo, what is this dude Paul talking about? I'm glad you asked because here it is. Right. I'm going to share my screen and people that are watching on the replay, tell me, are you familiar with attachment styles? If not, that's good, man. Because guess what? We're about to show you right about nowish. All right. So check it out. Right. There's different terms for these, by the way. For example, in this corner here, this is the secure attachment style. It means like you're self-assured, you're direct, you're responsive. That's at that point where you've learned how to resolve and address conflict and differences in the relationship. Dismissive. Okay, this is what I can tend to be in relationship. This is also called avoidant, right? So when coaches raise their hand, like whenever you see one of us, people are watching, whenever you see one of us raise our hand, that means like I can relate. I can relate. I do that too. So that's my point. That attachment style is like, you know what, man, I need space. I'm a lone wolf. I'm gonna be distant. Like stuff comes up, you know what? Pew, I'm out of here. All right. Now the preoccupied is also called the anxious. This is like I'm doubtful, or like I'm jealous, like, or they're gonna leave me. Super sensitive in conversations or in conflict. So in that conflict space, if I'm if I'm having an anxious attachment style, I'm most likely gonna avoid conflict, because I'll be thinking that if I get in conflict with this person, they may never talk to me again, and I don't want to lose them. This is almost like a codependent type of style. And I got to tell you, coach, what's interesting is as I was really like looking into this since yesterday, I'm like, damn, man, like I think I've been all of these attachment styles.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that possible? But
Absolutely.
yes, it is. So
absolutely.
Yeah, right. I was like, oh my goodness, this is like the archetypes. And then I started looking at coach. These attachment styles are relevant to different realms. Like the attachment styles in relationship, the attachment style in conflict, the attachment style in fun. Like there's a lot of different ways that these can apply. So peoples, I want to make sure we address all of these, right? So the other one that we see in this lower right hand corner here is fearful. So this is interesting, right? Because this is I thought that this was funny, not funny, haha, funny, but just very interesting, funny. Is that this is the self saboteur? Like I am low confidence, high avoidance. Like I don't know what's gonna happen here. Like in relationships, that they're an unknown, and they could think that something's going great, but then all of a sudden, what they'll do is they'll sabotage the relationship, because rather than settle into joy, they'll be like, "I'm gonna create chaos because I don't know if I'm comfortable with what's gonna happen on the other end." Right. So this is very interesting. I thought it was very interesting for us to go over this, because when we were talking, we were talking about this on Saturday, I recognized, I was like, dang, man, like the conflict and attachment are very commingled. It's like an attachment style can create a conflict, or the conflict can bring out the attachment style. It's like an inverse relationship, right?
Yeah.
Coach, you ever think about that?
Yeah. And, for me, everything for me can be traced back to what I call my sacred wound. Remember, we were talking about as human beings, we have an experience. For those of you who didn't hear it, so basically, what a sacred wound is, and it's a spiritual term, so it gets a little spiritual. But I believe everything does happen for a reason, and I believe that each of us, as a human being, have a divine purpose, and there is something we were put on the planet to do. And we were given some unique gifts and talents to be able to do those things. Very few people are willing to do the work to get to the understanding and the knowing what that purpose is. Okay. Yeah. But because you're tuned into BKC, we're going to drop this knowledge on you so that, yes, you can be aware.
That's how we do.
That's how we do it. But again, when I look at the sacred wound, is basically a sacred wound is an experience that we have, that in that moment, we make a decision that there's something wrong with us. And so a sacred wound doesn't have to be some painful, traumatic abuse. A sacred wound could be you're having a conversation with your dad and he says, you know what, I'm really disappointed in you. And in your little mind, you go, ooh, I'm a bad person. my dad doesn't like me. That's just how our little brains work, right? So when we have these sacred wounds, they actually are driven by what some people might call the ego. Now, for me, I believe the ego's job is to protect us. That's its primary focus. The ego is what creates the defense mechanisms to help or allow us to deal with all the shit we have to go through in life. Right? So we create these defense mechanisms. Well, my sacred wound was at 6 years old when my mom took me to live with my grandparents, who I didn't really know. And so at 6 years old, I made a decision that people who love you leave you. Okay? People who love you leave you. So my defense mechanism was to be nice, to keep people in relationship with me, because I thought by being nice, I would not drive people away. So it was that fear of abandonment that did not allow me to set healthy boundaries, because once again, it was driven by this fear that people would leave. So what did I do? I did everything in my power to make people like me, to keep them in the room with me, to keep them from leaving. Yeah. And so it was that defense mechanism that kept me from being able to create healthy boundaries, because I was always on the defense thinking, okay, I need to do this so that that person won't leave. So avoid conflict so people won't leave. Now, I had to be willing to heal that sacred wound. And in healing that sacred wound, what I've learned is, as you understand, there's always gold in the drama and the trauma. Well, the goal was I became very empathic, tuned in to how other people feel, because I was always tuning into other people's feelings because I didn't know how to be in touch with mine.
Dude, yes, brother.
And so by being in tune to other people's feelings, which I put ahead of my own, I became very empathic, and I can sense and feel energy really well with people. And so in healing that sacred wound, I found the gold, the gifts in it. And in being that empathetic person that I am, it allows me to relate to people better. When I'm in, for example, a facilitator role, that ability to feel that other person's energy allows me to be intuitive, to know if I'm facilitating where I might need to lead them, because I can feel into whatever it is they may be sharing, and it gives me the insight and awareness to support them where they need to be. And I do all of that without the need to try to make them like me. I do it out of my authentic awareness and empathy for them. And that's completely different than doing it to get their approval.
Right. Damn, coach, you said a lot there, brother. You said a lot there. And it explains a lot. I think this is important. And thank you for sharing this, because I think this is something that happens for a lot of people. And I know this happens for me, is that it took me a long time to recognize that my empathic ability was a gift, and especially how I got my empathic ability.
And you do have that.
Yes, thank you.
You do have that. You're very good at that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's because of what you said, man. Like, I was always looking at people's energy first before even addressing my own. Like, it was like, oh, I know where they are right now. Yep, okay. I know this is how I get to go in, or like how I can, like, my thing was, I think what helped me make it so strong is very similar to yours is I'm an includer by nature, because like just a lot of the situations I went through when I was younger about wanting to be included and thinking that I was like isolated or alone. Like, I never wanted anyone else to feel that way. So I was always looking at, okay, well, what is this? Like, what kind of energy is this person coming with? Like, who do I get to be to match their energy, to get them to open up, let them know that they're that they matter, that they're cared for, that they're noticed, that they're seen, that they're heard. And a lot of times that in itself was like, while it was beautiful for them and like getting them to be included, it was at my expense a lot of the time, coach.
Yeah.
Because like I would be resistant. Now looking back on it, I would be resistant to really say what was going on, for fear like, okay, like there may be like a fight here, or like they may never talk to me again. But it was usually far from the case, because I'm curious, like for you, like one of the things I recognize is that it helped me to it helped me to learn how to communicate more effectively. And I'm curious for you, coach, was that one of the things that helped you to really be able to learn to express yourself, or were there other tactics or other traits or actions that you took to help you move past that people pleaser and like thinking other
Well, I
people
think
first?
again, I think the gift is compassion,
Mm, mm,
because compassion is when you see someone hurting and you wish they weren't. Okay, that's the
mm.
way to look at compassion.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
know
yeah.
for me, what allows me to have compassion is because everything that I went through, and I don't want anybody to feel that way.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
don't want anybody to feel that sense of toxic shame, that sense of I'm not good enough. And so my passion and my purpose drives me to have compassion. And that's why I write, that's why I speak, that's why I do what I do.
Mhm,
And it's
mhm.
interesting because the experts will say that when a person experiences trauma,
Yeah.
the overwhelming majority of them will do the same thing. Okay. They
Hmm.
repeat the trauma. But there's a part or a portion of people who do the complete opposite. So, for example, think about parenting.
Yeah.
If your parents were abusive and violent, chances are you grow up to be the same way. But there are
Mhm.
some people that do the complete opposite. So, for me, as someone who experienced every imaginable type of abuse, I did the opposite. I didn't abuse because of that sense of compassion that I have, because of how my sacred wound triggered my compassion and awareness for others. So that
Mm.
was the gift. As painful as it was at the beginning, it now is one of my greatest gifts, to care for others without putting them ahead of me, but to
Mhm.
just care for them because I have compassion for them. And so, again, that's for me how I'm able to deal with conflict so effortlessly. Because
Gotcha.
I don't get sucked in to whatever that negativity might be, whatever the attack might be. I can just be grounded in who I am, what I believe, and just say, hey, look, that's your belief, that's your opinion. Mine is different than yours. And I don't have to make them wrong
Yeah.
for their opinions and beliefs.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, dude, man, that right there is the growth part of conflict, I think, man.
Absolutely.
Is being free to make someone wrong, right or wrong. And this comes back to your when you where you first talked about fighting versus conflict, right? And I think this even plays into the attachment styles a little bit, but I want to focus on the conflict, because one of the things like I recognized, which helped me out with the conflicts, is recognizing before I even choose to discuss something with someone and begin to have this conversation about a differing of ideas and thoughts. Like, do I have to be right about this? Like, do they have to take on my perspective with this? And if it's like, yeah, I got to be right about this, then I'm going to be resistant to getting into conflict, because there's an attachment that I have to what I'm saying that I get to be willing to detach from someone else accepting it for me to move forward. You follow?
Yep.
So it's very, and I think this is a maturity play too, man. This is the big time maturity play, coach, because in my judgment, it is about noticing like, hey, do I have to be right about this? Because when you think about most conflicts, they really are fights because people are either looking to convince someone, convict someone, or condemn someone. Right? It's like, well, if you're not doing it the way I choose to do it, then like there's nothing to say. There's nothing to really talk about here, man. So it's very, very interesting, man. I'm checking in. I know we got some people here that are watching. What questions, comments do you have about conflict or attachment?
And here's the point too, Paul. So for the viewers, when I speak about compassion, it doesn't mean we become doormats for folks.
Thank you for that. Yep. Yeah.
We're not, I'm not in any way saying, you just got to take on everybody's stuff to be compassionate. No, not at all. What I'm saying is when you have healthy boundaries, when you're connected to your authentic self in such a way that you're authentic and not hiding behind a mask trying to pretend to be something you're not, when you're doing all those things, you're disconnected from who you are. And so if you're just doing things to get other people's approval, to get people to like you, that energy doesn't feel good.
No, bro.
And one of the things I used to do a lot was monitor whatever I was saying to people. Rather than just being real and authentic with this is what's true for me, I would sit back and listen. And then in my little mind, I was coming up with my answer to what I was going to say, but I was making sure that it wasn't going to cause conflict with people, especially in relationships. So it is this internal dialogue we have with ourselves that creates most of the conflict. Because for me, that conflict was in my little mind is that people who love you will leave you. So, what do I have to do? Let me think about what I'm going to say. So I say the right thing so I don't chase them away. Avoiding conflict. But it was draining. That's the best way to put it. It was draining. It's draining for me to try to take on everybody else's stuff. And it's what makes a lot of people fall into depression, fall into anxiety, because we're trying to take care of everybody else except ourselves.
Brother. Listen, man, you hit that right on the head, man. And especially this is still, we still have a couple days left in Men's Mental Health Month, Men's Mental Health Awareness. I think for men, this is something big. And we talked about this as far as men of color with conflict something I mentioned is I would refrain from conflict because, as I mentioned before, I was unsure as how I could manage my anger. So I never wanted to be the angry black man in the office. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I never wanted to be that person. I wanna present some things because as we start to wind down, I want to present some stuff here. Because one of the things that we talked to in the call was, once we talk about conflict, like as we address what, especially in this call, addressing the distinction between conflict and fighting, let's talk about conflict resolution and coach. This is some things that you were just saying before. I was hearing you say practice active listening to self, right? And understand the perspectives and emotions of all involved, like what's going on. And this is something you mentioned even like before in the beginning of the call, like what are the feelings that are going on for me? Right? Before anyone can really resolve conflict, it's a key piece to really be self-aware about what's happening within you and being able to communicate that. Now, we also talked about showing empathy and validate the bases. When we're talking about bases here, bases mean your language bases, like what you think, what you feel, what you see, and what you sense, right? Like being able to communicate those clearly, because then that will help both parties to understand where both parties are coming from. As is mentioned here, this creates a safe, respectful place for people to really settle into, like, hey, what's going on for us here? What's this communication really looking like? Another piece here is open and honest communication. So listen, again, this is looking at the basis. What are you feeling? What do you want? What do you see? Like, what do you sense? This is being able to assert or communicate these bases assertively and respectfully. And notice it says it's free of being aggressive or passive. Passive is what Coach and I were talking about before. Like, I don't really want to say anything because I don't want to get upset, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, what happens is then we start to go sideways with stuff and like start to say some smart aleck comments, rather than being direct about what's really going on for us. We'll say some snide remarks. Did I say that right? Snide, snive. I don't know. Snide, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, and then in this too is using I statements, right? So if there's a potential conflict, rather than being like, well, when you do this, no. Again, this conflict portion is about awareness. I'm experiencing this when you did this, this is what I experienced. Okay. And again, it's claiming the action that they did, but it's more of what was your response to that action. And then it could be like, hey, I'm just checking in. This was what I was experiencing when you did that. Like, was that the intention? Or, should I take this? Do I get to take this another way? Or like, is there a way that we could talk about this? Or it could be a whole variety of things that go on. The key thing is owning your experience, because that starts to create a space for open and honest communication. And then collaborative problem solving. Dun, 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 dun. Listen, this is when you seek win-win outcomes. How do you seek win-win outcomes? I'm glad you asked. It's knowing yourself. What do you want to happen out of this conflict, this opportunity for growth in space? And I want to recognize that you diving into this type of thing, this type of collaborative problem solving, this comes back to the joy and sadness, right? That we mentioned before. What was it? That they said? Yeah, it was loss and joy, gain and sadness. The loss is like after you go through this, the way you were, the way the scenario was before is gone, because it's in new territory. It's an opportunity. It's something that's collaboratively worked out with both parties. So now it means that that old conflict or that old butting of heads or differences is now gone, or it's respected. So just wanted to highlight those things because I think it's important. Is there another one? Oh yeah, compromise and flexibility. Again, this is knowing yourself. Are you willing to compromise and demonstrate your flexibility? And also, are you willing to notice or express or even come to the conclusion that there is a middle ground between the two of you? That's big. Can you do that? That's a big part of resolving conflict and settling and stepping into something new. Coach, any comments on that before we
Yeah.
start?
So in terms of resolving conflict, let's also look at ways to avoid the conflict from the beginning.
Ooh, goody.
Two ways to do that. I don't remember who said this, but it's very powerful. It said, most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. Think about that for a moment. When we're listening, we're already thinking about how we're going to respond to what they're saying. So we're really not hearing what they say. So one way to cut conflict off is active listening, as you just mentioned, to be fully present to what that other person is saying. Not thinking about what your response is going to be, but just paying attention to and checking into how you feel about whatever it is they may be sharing. So starting from the beginning, if we become active listeners at the beginning, we can avoid a lot of conflict, because sometimes in our attempt to answer the question before they even finish, we're creating a conflict because we're not hearing exactly what they were saying. Okay. Number two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and number 2, and I love what Stephen Covey said, and he wrote this in what was it, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think it was. He said, "Seek first to understand, and then be understood." That's really, really powerful. Because if we're seeking to understand another person's point of view, and we can be detached to be detached from whatever that point of view is, then we can listen with an open mind and an open heart. And if we disagree, that's absolutely okay. But once again, we don't have to make them wrong because they see things differently than we do.
Right.
So
and it was seek first to understand and be understood.
And then be understood. So when I'm in communication with someone, perfect example. Okay, so I work in retail. In retail, you get every imaginable type of person that comes in, and people just have their issues. And so a guy comes in, obviously very, very angry. Okay. He is really upset about something. So I immediately pick up on the anger. I got it. I got this guy's wound up way too tight. So he comes over. They call the manager to the front because the guy's. So I walk over. I pick up on the anger. So the first thing I want to do is I want to understand, first of all, what he's upset about. Rather than get defensive, I simply listen to what it is that he's angry about. Now, because I didn't get defensive, see, because here's where conflict comes from. Position, opposition. Neither person's willing to move, right? So this guy comes in with all this anger. Well, if I would have come in with anger at the same time, guess what? We're going to get stuck. Nothing's going to move. But because I didn't get sucked into his anger, I wanted to understand what he was angry about, and I listened. And so basically what I said is, sir, I understand that you're really upset about this. I get it. I fully understand. Now let's talk about ways we can resolve it. And just by saying that, I could sense his energy change.
Yep. I believe that.
Because he knew immediately that, number one, I didn't take a defensive position, so I didn't bring that anger in, but he knew I was listening. He knew I was listening. So again, if we listen to understand and then be understood, which means, so after I let him know that I wasn't, having that negative energy, then I express what was true for me. This is why this happened.
Yeah.
And so the same situation was there, but his energy completely changed. And I said, now, here's what we can do to resolve it. He just lit up. That's all he really wanted. So listening to understand first is a powerful way to avoid conflict, but it takes someone with some awareness to be able to do that, because our human nature is to protect and defend ourselves. And so when somebody comes with at us with that energy, fight, flight, or freeze, right? Well, the reason we should be doing this work is because we have the ability to pause. I can't express how powerful that is. Be able to pause versus just respond.
Power of the pause, bro.
Yeah. And so again, to avoid conflict, number one, seek first to understand their point of view. You don't have to agree with it at all.
Right.
But at least seek to understand it. And in understanding it, I guarantee you've already begun diffusing it. Simple. It's simple, but very complicated. Or shall I say,
it is.
Not easy. Not easy.
It's not easy because it's really stepping outside of yourself, man.
Yeah.
It's like and especially I agree with what you're saying about the need to respond rather than to hear someone.
Yep.
Because it's like, again, I think that's when that ego comes in, like, oh, I got to be ready to respond. So it's like, I'm listening to what person's saying so I can find something to disagree with.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right.
like instead of being like, all right, so wait, what I heard you say is this. That's one of the things I love about active listening is the echo, because the echo forces me when I'm in communication with someone, whether there's conflict or smooth sales, it still gets me to tune into what I'm hearing them say so I
Right.
can get clarity after they're done speaking. Like, okay, thank you for sharing that. I just want to make sure I heard what you said. And what I heard was blah 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 da 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 da. Is that right? Yeah, that's actually exactly what I said. Cool. So here's like you did. So okay, so here's how I think we can resolve this. Oh, Junk, you're not gonna fight me on it? No, no, I want to resolve this. And that's the thing though, too, coach. I'm sure you find it in retail. When you come with this, like, hey, okay, here's how we can resolve this. I'm sure you probably get the like, what? Like, you're not
Exactly.
gonna try and battle me on this?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, wait, what? Are you serious? Like, yeah, I'm serious, man. We're not gonna fight. But
But
coach, before we, huh?
here's the ultimate question.
Yeah.
Ultimate question for the audience when it comes to conflict. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Ooh.
Do you want to be right
Ooh.
or do you want to be happy? That's a powerful question to
Ooh.
ask yourself in the moment based on potential conflict, especially when it comes to intimate relationships.
Dude.
I personally would much rather be happy.
Dude. Yes. Yes. Hands down, bro. Hands down, bro. And that's a great question. I think that's something that like everybody can really like settle into that question because that's deep. And
Mm-hmm.
be honest, man. Be freaking honest. Because most people be like, oh no, of course, yeah, no, I want to be happy. But really, they want to be right.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to be right, man. Stop playing, man. Dude, that's
That's
coach. That's a great question, man. Thank you for
that's
that,
the
bro.
foundation. That's the foundation of all conflict and disagreements. A need to be right.
Ooh, child. Hey, listen. So we're about to wrap it up. Any last minute comments from the crew? Going once, going, excuse me, going twice. All right. Well, listen. You know what, Coach? It's a wrap, man. We'll be back up in here next week. Hey, listen, for people that are watching the replay, type in hashtag replay. Leave a comment where we can be checking on the comments and stuff, and we'll be responding to that. Next week, I have no idea what we're going to be covering, and stay tuned. If you have yet to get the BKC newsletter, tap into the brother www.brotherhoodofkings.com. You can go onto that website. You're going to have all the goodies and the paths to get to the Sunday call, Wednesday call. Apparel's available right now. Trainings are coming up in the new year and first quarter. So listen, tap in right now. We got call on Wednesday nights, Wisdom Wednesdays. We also have calls on Saturday afternoons, 12 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And then we also have these BKC live conversations on Sunday evening, which is a collection of pulling together the topics that we covered previously in the week. So you all can get an idea of what we discussed. And this call right here, this is for everyone. This is for men and women of all colors to really dive into what we go into here at the Brotherhood of Kings. We encourage you to share this information and want to make you aware that the calls on Wednesday and Saturday are specifically for men of color only. So thank you all for being here, Coach. Thank you for riding co-pilot with me, bro. Appreciate you, man.
And if you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel.
Yes.
Like
Por
and
favor.
subscribe. Yes, like and subscribe to the channel. All right, Paul. Appreciate you, man. Love you.
You got it, Coach. Love you, man. Peace.
All right.
and in the stream.